Okay, if you give me your names and your positions on the paper.
I'm Monica Sinnette, and I'm a staff photographer with the Daily Chronicle in DeKalb.
I'm Adam Polisi. It's Poulisse, and I am a photographer. I am a reporter for the Daily Chronicle.
And where were you at the time that you got the call?
We were actually out in the field with two storm chasers, locally based here right in DeKalb. Two storm chasers, and we were on the opposite side of the tornado. We were actually really out of town when it happened because they were chasing, if I remember right, another storm system.
Yes, we were with the Windy City Storm Chasers. Going to do a story about storm chasing, not knowing about this, and by the time I started work and we went out, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we started driving out, but the sky was just bright blue, sunny, puffy clouds. We were driving out west on 88 and stopped around Paw, somewhere around there, and kind of pulled off on the side of the road so they could watch the radar a little bit, and we conversed with them back and forth about how much time do we have. The only storm system they saw right now was out in Iowa, and they on the radar they could see their other storm chasing, what do you call them, friends, buddies, on the radar where they were in towards the storm in Iowa. And we conversed and said, you know what, we don't have anything else, and I needed to get photos for the story, and we said, why don't we just drive out in that direction and see if we can't catch it. And we drove out west, out towards Morrison, Illinois. We pulled out Morrison, yes, and waited for the tornado. The sirens were going, and we waited for the tornado to come up over us, and we were going to drive down and around and try to catch it from behind to see if we can't get photos of them doing what they do, as well as the tornado. But the tornado itself was rain wrapped, and so we couldn't see an actual funnel, and we missed the tornado in our path to try to go up, back and around from behind the tornado to start following it instead of being in front of it. And the tornado had blown a barn and some electrical lines across this farm road, and so we that little bit of time kind of made us miss our chance. So we started heading back, and we hear on their radar that there is a tornado forming out towards Rochelle, and we kind of all looked at each other like, you're kidding, right?
And there was some discussion, like, while we were on the road with the storm chasers, should we stay or should we go? Should we stay or should we go? And as it turns out, we ended up going, and we were west of what was actually happening in our backyard.
Okay.
And like she had said, it was a rain-wrapped tornado, so the direction toward Kirkland, Fairdale, it was all blue. It was all covered in rain, so we couldn't see any funnel at all, which, speaking from the photographer's sense, was
Kind of a bummer.
It was, yeah, definitely
I
a bust,
hate
yeah.
to talk about like severe weather like that, but for story purposes, it's our job to tell the story, to really be there to depict the story the way it happened, and to it's our duty to give everyone the right to know, the need to know, of what's going on in the area. And when we started to hear that there's a tornado coming out towards Rochelle, granted Rochelle is not in our coverage zone, but it's pretty darn close, and when we're not there, when we're 2 hours out, not there to actually be there to cover it, you kind of have like this helpless feeling in your stomach, like it's our job to be there and we're not there, and what can we do? And
we did get a call from Brett, our editor, and some text messages, kind of updating us. And then when we had kind of started to get a feel for how big this was and how disastrous it was, then he said, this is going to be our lead story. This is going to be our main centerpiece. So we need you, when you get back in that area, we need a story for the front page, that the lead story that is, that tells what happened. And we couldn't get into Fairdale that night. We into the Fairdale main area. We couldn't. That was that street. What was the street's name?
With Fairdale Road.
Fairdale
in
Road.
Fairdale from
So
the
you got on
south
72?
interest. 72 onto I don't remember the name of the road, but it was the south entrance to Fairdale on Fairdale Road.
Right.
That's where we were being led because 72 was blocked off, we had heard. And we were being told that they were letting people through onto Fairdale Road. But, you know, we were 2 hours out from DeKalb, let alone, you know, we were in the backseat of Storm Chaser's car. So by the time we got back here, a little less than 2 hours, I will say they did go fast. We hopped into my car and we drove out there as quickly as we could. You know, it was windy and rainy and dark,
Very
and
dangerous.
never being out there and driving on farm roads can be a little bit dangerous, especially no street lights or anything like that. And never being out to Fairdale before, I haven't been further west of Kirkland as far as covering our area. And we drove up to Fairdale Road, and there's a Sycamore cop there blocking the road, and you know, lots of emergency vehicles in and out all over the place. And he said, okay, well, you can park on the side of the road and you can walk up. And we said, great. You know, we parked on the side of the road, got all our gear out, and started walking. And he's like, it's about a mile up, you know, but you can walk. And as soon as we started walking up there, and I think it was a county sheriff came down and said,
Sheriff's deputy.
yeah, came down and said, you guys, it's unsafe to walk up there. There's no lights, and a lot of vehicles are coming in and out, and they're not thinking about where you are. So just for safety reasons, you need to stay put. And we're thinking, crap, you know, like, we still have the story to tell, and there's still that feeling in our stomach.
And they weren't letting anyone in that night.
No.
At a point, they were saying, no more volunteers. We have enough volunteers. They were turning away volunteers. They were turning away the media. I mean, everyone was getting turned away.
And it was like the minute before we got there, they started cutting people out.
Yeah.
So we're thinking, well, what can we possibly do? So we start driving around, and I finally talked to this old I don't know cops from all over the place were coming to help. I don't even remember where he came from, but he had an older car, and I kind of like said, you know, you're preventing me from doing my job. I have to tell what's happening here right now. I understand the safety risks, you know, but I have a story to tell, and people are wanting to know. It's our duty to let people know. And he said, okay, you know, there's some electrical lines down if you kept heading north on Irene Road. So I said, okay, I'll be really careful. And he let us through. And so we drove up on Ivy Road, and if you go a little bit north on Ivy Road from 72, it isn't technically Fairdale anymore, but there was damage up there on Ivy Road because in the path it went diagonally, well, up north this way. So, and I drove up as far as I could, lots of trees down and stuff, and we turned on to Wheeler Road, and that's where we saw our first real damage.
Yep. And we parked, and it was very, very dark, and it was incredibly quiet, which was an odd thing to see with all the destruction around you, and for it just to be as quiet as it was and to be as calm as it was at that point was just very eerie. And you know, we're out on Wheeler Road, which is a road not heavily traveled. None of these roads in Fairdale are, and with the exception of 72, I guess. But you know, it's very quiet, and it seemed like as if it was almost quieter. And Monica and I, you know, we saw the destruction, and we saw the house on. Actually, this is on 72. This is on 72. This is not the Wheeler Roadhouse. Okay, so strike that. That's not the Wheeler Roadhouse. But we did go to Wheeler Road, and we got out of the car and we just saw, I think, the one house where we talked to the people, and we just got really emotional.
It was that the adrenaline and the stress, and you know,
and just seeing it, I think, just was overwhelming. I can't really explain like what the emotion was, but it was overwhelming because, you know, we knew the deadline was ticking, and we knew once we finally got on Wheeler Road and could see for ourselves the destruction, I think the impact of everything finally hit of what we were facing on how big the story was going to be the next few days.
And I think like movies are one thing, but if you see natural disaster destruction firsthand, that's it's a whole other thing. And my first thought pulling up to the house is I hope everyone's okay.
Right.
Is everyone okay?
And what are we going to see?
What are we going to see? Is there going to be someone? Are we going to need to help? We're humans. It would be the only.
We're humans first.
Yeah, humans
Journalists second.
Yeah. So.
So what was the first survivor you talked? Who was the first survivor you talked to? The resident?
Of Fairdale or where we were on Wheeler Road?
Wherever you started.
Okay.
It was Pamela Metcalf, PAMELAMETCALF, of Wheeler Road. That was the first person that we talked to. And we went up and we said, "Are you okay?" And she seemed pretty cheery, dare I say. She was not shaken up at all. And if you had seen the house, it was caused to be pretty shaken up. And once we found out that she was okay and got a feel for how she was doing in her situation, and she was the first person I talked to. And she had, her house, I remember it just being completely,
like the front of it was gone, and the barn next to it was demolished. And although it was really dark and hard to see,
yeah, you could,
very large trees were down in the front yard.
Her chicken coop, I know, was destroyed somehow. And if I remember right,
She said her dogs were okay. I talked to her later.
Yeah.
Dog. Her attic, I think she was when her attic collapsed inside her house. But she was when the house shook like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. And when we peeked out the door, there was nothing there. I remember for some reason she went either back in the house or around the house after we got done talking to her. And she came back and she had totally changed. She was very emotional. Her neighbors were there with her, or someone in that. I don't know if it was her next door neighbor. If I remember right, it might have been. It was someone nearby was there with her to give support. And she came back around and
Probably, shock, a lot of shock.
A lot of shock, yeah. A lot of, once I guess she had kind of seen what she was dealing with.
And then you moved away after that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we heard that finally I think Eddie, our sports editor, was in the office that night, right?
Yep,
And he was sending me updates of what he was hearing over the scanner. And saying, that they just mentioned that they're going to open up Route 72 for staging area for media. So we packed up our stuff as quickly as we could, and we headed back down Wheeler to Irene Road, and got on 72 towards the center of Fairdale. And they staged us in front of what used to be Kettleson Custom Iron, which was what everyone saw in the media.
The backdrop,
Yeah.
Right here, where they were staging all the media here, and it was torn up drastically.
Did you see any injuries?
No injuries, because by the time they let us in there, it was probably 10:30, roughly.
Yeah.
But when the staging was finished for the media, the two men who were inside Kettleson Custom Iron walked by and was talking with the sheriff who was guarding the rest of 72 where nobody else could pass through. And they had mentioned briefly that they had been inside of there and they survived. They had no nicks or scratches on them. And they were both drinking a beer and, doing what they could, but...
This is pitch dark. They were
pitch dark,
Yeah.
yes.
Very dark, yeah.
What about emergency vehicles? Did you see many coming and going?
When we first pulled up there, saw a lot coming and going.
That's where we couldn't get in, right?
Where we couldn't get in south of Fairdale there, yeah. There were a lot coming in. I can't say I remember a lot going out, but it was more than just emergency vehicles. It was, I don't know,
I can't,
other kind of vehicles, like big vehicles to help clean up and that kind of stuff.
Search and rescue?
Yes.
Right. So how did you file a story from that far away?
we sat in the car and we had a portable Wi-Fi, a MiFi, and we filed from there. We hooked it up, and it was very slow.
We had our laptops.
Yeah.
It was extremely slow because first of all, in such a remote area, it's gonna be hard to pick up sound. Second of all, bad weather.
Right.
Third, whatever cell towers were there were down, and it was really hard to get a signal. The closest one was if you kept going west on 72, like you're gonna get on 39. There's something center, Monroe Center.
Mhm.
That was the closest signal.
Right.
So you had to move to get a signal, or?
We didn't. We said we're just staying put. We're gonna go as slowly as possible, and it was very frustrating. But
Because imagine how slow Wi-Fi is going to be out there, and then with all the weather going on, and then two people, one trying to file a story, one trying to file the accompanying photos. It just made it slower.
not to mention all the microwave trucks from all the other news stations that were there
Yeah.
trying to also
Yeah.
clog up the signal.
So we got it. I mean, I think if I remember right, I think like I was typing without the internet. Like I was typing on like a word processor, and then you were doing filing photos, and then I think we like volleyed volleyed it back and forth. Like, okay, I'm off. You
Took
use it
turns
now.
on the
Yeah.
internet and just trying to email. And my photo editor Danielle, she was a lot of help because just with the time and how long it took, it was easier for me to just take the raw images that I took and email them to her. And she understands breaking news. She's been in the news business for a while, and she was there processing the photos and sending them to the desk from her home. So that was much easier. Yes.
Okay. So what did you use for equipment? What did you have for equipment for your camera?
We had just gotten these brand new Canon cameras, 7D Mark IIs, and they shoot much better in low light than our older cameras. But I did have both, and I had all our lenses that we possibly have, our wide angle, our standard, our telephoto, and then the 300 lens, which is I can get real close because I had a feeling that they weren't going to let us get real close. So just in case I had all the equipment I could possibly need.
And you just had a laptop?
I had a laptop. I had my recorder too, and that's in a pen and paper.
And our cell phones were now required to take video with our
Yeah.
cell phones, just to get it up immediately.
So cell phones worked?
They did, yes.
It did. It took a really long time to get the videos
yeah.
from the app that we use here in the newspaper. It took a little while to actually get it posted.
Right.
Yeah.
So who did you talk to up the way of officials? Did they have official spokesman for like sheriff or someone there?
Sheriff Scott was there.
He was probably the first one, right?
I think so. He was the first official that I spoke with, if I'm remembering the chronology right, because you got that photo of me in the media.
Yes, when we first got to the staging area, it was like right when he started talking to the media, and obviously everyone swarmed, and it's
Right.
raining and windy, and
Did he know about any deaths at that time?
There was one that had been known.
I see.
There were obviously 2 deaths overall, but he had known of one, if I remember right. And just looking at the newspaper, we did have one confirmed by press time. So, yes, I don't know at that time. I don't think we knew specifics, so.
no, they were being very vague, obviously, because they were continuing to do search the next day. They had closed it off even to residents. They had told us that nobody was going to be allowed in. So we had to kind of prepare for that too, because it is our coverage area before it is anybody else's coverage area. And what was kind of getting on my nerves was watching other people get access over us.
Which that didn't happen until a few days.
Well, I know a
later.
Chicago Tribune photographer that I know got in somehow, snuck around, and when DeKalb County Sheriff found out about it, he was very happy.
What? How late did you stay there?
That first night?
Mm.
Oh man.
I don't know. I gotta think. I didn't even go home that night. I live in Rockford, so I stayed with the sports reporter Jesse. I remember actually my head finally hitting the pillow at about 2 a.m.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And
That's
then-
when I got home.
Yeah, and then getting a text message at 7 a.m. about the presser that morning. So
And you stayed where?
Well, I live in St. Charles, so it's about a 40-minute ride from here, and we came back to the office so he could get his car and whatnot, and I probably got home around 2 as well. So we probably left left up there around 1 in the morning, just about.
How many digital images did you take?
A lot. I mean, first of all, with how dark it is, you have to take such a slow shutter speed, and you know, I didn't have a tripod. So you're trying to take in as many as you can, hoping one of them's going to be clear. Even with the new equipment we have, it does shoot better in darker light, but it still comes out pretty dark.
Right.
After we talked to Roger Scott, or I listened to Roger Scott talk for the media staging that night, and he said that nobody was going to be allowed in, I knew we had to get some sort of aerial photo, because if we were not allowed in, that's the next option. And I know Tom Cleveland, who's the manager at the Taylor Municipal Airport. And I gave Danielle a call because she works the day shift, and I said, you need to get a hold of this guy and you need to get on a plane. And that's exactly what she did. And she was able to get really decent images from up there to really show the path.
Right.
So
what was your assignment the next day?
hang out up there.
Yeah, get as much as we could because we still weren't getting in on Friday. We didn't get in until Sunday to talk to people. Saturday, get whatever you could.
Saturday,
Or Friday,
I was able to ride in DeKalb County Sheriff Gary Dumby's car.
Sheriff deputy.
Sheriff deputy.
Chief
Gary,
deputy.
Chief Deputy Gary Dumby's car. And he wasn't allowing me to get out of the car, which was a little bit tough for me, but I knew that we had to really respect the, what's the word?
The wishes.
The wishes and the, you know, how big of an event this really was for such a small town, and small towns tend to be closer knit, as I've experienced since moving out here. So there was a man who I talked to on, you interviewed him, Roger Powell, right?
Yes.
We talked to Roger Powell, who lived on the corner of 72 and White Street, and his house was completely demolished.
Right, and his daughter Dina Shell was telling me how she got up on top of the washer to look out.
Yes, and we talked to Roger. I snapped a photo of him, and I said, okay, well, they're going to start letting people in tomorrow. Is it okay that if I find you, would it be all right if I am able to take some pictures? And he said, yeah, it's not a problem. And currently at the time, his wife was in the hospital for some stress-related symptoms.
Well, she also hit her mouth or tooth or something.
Probably, yeah.
Going down the stairs.
The staircase fell over.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that. So when I was driving around in Gary Dumby's car, and I said, okay, there's a man, and I want you to drive up White Street because there's a man, and if he's there, I talked to him, I can take his picture. And so I was allowed to get out of the car at that point and take a picture. Him and his daughter Dina were there, and he had told me the day before that he's hoping he can find his checkbook and a couple other things. And when I got out of Gary Dumby's car and I walked up and I said, hi Roger, how are you doing? And he said, well, I found my checkbook. And he's like, and I also found this case of beer. And it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. He was just like, you know what, right about now I think I could use a beer.
Warm or cold?
Yeah.
Don't matter, yeah. So, but his house was completely leveled.
And we found him, I was at Kirkland Fire Department, and that's where they were getting the donations.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a huge line of people. I mean, it was crowded with people wanting to donate, people wanting to volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very, very strict about media not going inside, because that's where a lot of the victims were. So they said, stay outside. And that's where I just, talked to some people as they were leaving, and I actually talked to, if I remember right, it was his brother-in-law. He said, well, my brother-in-law's, is it brother-in-law?
Yeah, on Irene Road they live, yeah.
Yeah, and they said, well, my brother-in-law, his house was destroyed, and, he's staying with us. So, yeah, that's the one. So he said, yeah, I can try to connect you with him a little bit later. And that's how we found Roger. So, through a family member. It's like, the beer story reminded me, it was, I think it was Sunday. I was there, and that was the first time I'd actually been inside Fairdale, like in the midst of everything.
Daylight.
Yeah, in daylight. And I was on kind of the opposite side of Fairdale, like a few streets over, and I heard cheering and like hollering and hooting and happiness. And I was like, maybe they found someone, maybe, I don't know. So I ran over there. and it was like an old time skillet that they had found, and it was been passed down. And they used to make hot cake. The family made hot cakes with it, and I ran over, and I was like, you know, what happened? Oh, well, we found a hot plate or a skillet, or it was one of the two, and we had, you know, we're so happy because it's been passed down for generations.
Heirlooms,
and
yeah.
yeah, and I was like, well, you got to talk to me for the newspaper. You got to tell this story, and they were, that was, so it was just kind of interesting, like, you know, like the little things like that
Sure.
when they found that it was so.
I have to say, I gotta jot this in that, you know, in recent years, there's been, what's the word, like a trend in that people tend to not like the media, and they have a disproportionate view of what the media's purpose is and what they do, and there's a difference, you know, between entertainment news and paparazzi and trying to
And TV cameras right here.
right in your face, and newspapers and journalists, TV and newspaper journalists is, we're trying to tell the story. I'm not trying to exploit anyone. We're not trying to exploit anyone. We're not trying to profit off of anybody's loss. That is not our job. And I understand how hard it would be to have somebody stick a camera in my face when I'm going through the rubble of my home trying to find my belongings. But I'm human, so I you know, when I went in to Fairdale on Saturday in Gary Dumby's car, and just seeing it in daylight for the first time, just stuff. My jaw just like dropped open, and I was just like, I couldn't imagine in a small town like that that's so old, that was, you know, built before zoning happened in that area.
And so close knit too.
And so close-knit.
Knows everyone.
Every single house in that 3-block community was a home. It was a home. There were heirlooms, there were, you know, generations lived in those houses. You know, at 25, like, some 25-year-olds maybe don't understand, but like, I couldn't imagine.
And you do make relationships with the people that you talk to in Fairdale. That, you know, the people I talked to, one gentleman had said, you know, I haven't talked to anyone else, but I'll talk to you. And as far as I know, I'm the only one he's still talked to media-wise. You know, it's very personal. You know, you're with someone in the most personal time of their life. You know, Clem Schultz talking, you know, a day or two after his wife died, and being so willing and open to talk. A lot of them wouldn't talk, you know, and you respect that, you know, no comment, and you left them alone, and you respect it as such. But the ones who are willing to talk, I think it was, you know, a nice relief for them to be able to talk, and to be able to tell someone the story. And it just, yeah, you definitely, you build relationships, you know, with these people. The days after, you know, the people I've talked to, such as the Fairdale student who became prom queen at Hiawatha, if I remember right. That was Hiawatha.
Yes.
Okay.
That was Monica's, Hernandez's,
What was her name?
it was her daughter.
It was her daughter, Casey Martinez.
Yes.
You know, the Hiawatha High School senior, who became prom queen, and who the community helped her fix her dress that was ripped up that night of the tornado. The young guy, Levi Novotny, who was also on court, and everyone who helped him, and people who, like, you know, Roger and his dog, and Clem talking about his wife. I mean, it's a very, very personal situation, and you have to respect those who don't want to speak, and then you definitely have to respect the ones who are willing to speak and tell their story.
How many of those Shaw Media people showed up out there? Did they send any other teams out, or just you two?
Do you mean
Over the next 2 or 3 days, or what?
what? Do you mean like just the Daily Chronicle, or
Yeah, I meant
other
the Shaw Media people, anybody.
We were, you, me, and Danielle were probably the only 3
Right.
to really. Well, Brett went up there on the Saturday after also and he talked to the Kirkland mayor
Yeah, we were definitely the go-to people in that, and I have the Fairdale beat now. You know, anything that comes
I was
up.
going to say, how are you following up on that now? Are you just doing a constant check on the people?
Yeah, obviously the rezoning is the big issue right now, and that's coming up. So rezoning, following that, following, you know, families as you hear from them. I think one of the major stories that we found in this, and we're the only one who really reported, or we were the only one who were only media that's reported on it, was the monkey that was found in the house. And the family reached out to me because we couldn't find that family. We knew who they were. I had found their names, but we couldn't get a hold of them. And trying to maintain contact with them and get their story about what happened, because that's a really unique angle that is just...
I guess the monkey freaked out. It was...
The monkey was very, very traumatized, and it did die a few days later, and it really devastated the family. So keeping in contact, because there are going to continue to be stories for, I would say, years, in terms of, you know, when that first house is finally rebuilt, you know.
We're going to celebrate right along with them.
Exactly.
And we want to show the triumphant, you know, rebuilding of such a small, very, you know, historic old town.
Because a lot of them want to rebuild.
Yes.
Most of them, almost all of the people I talked to want to rebuild. They don't want to, you know, duplicate what they had, and really they can't, but they want to rebuild and they want to get their lives back together. And that's going to take years. So we continue to follow up. The rezoning has helped kind of bring things back to light again, because this was only 2 months ago. And
Yeah, just yesterday, 2 months.
it feels like it, yeah, it really does. And continuing to find those unique angles and talking to people. It's been I've covered some pretty big things in my career. I covered the Sandy Hook shooting. I covered the Boston Marathon bombings.
Oh.
I covered California earthquakes. I covered the UC Santa Barbara shooting that happened last. And this was about the most exhausting story I've ever been on. It was completely tiresome. I was sunburnt. Or windburnt. We never decided.
Yeah, well, we don't know about that.
I was really, really red for some reason for the days that come in, very much in pain and tired and just emotionally drained and just being out in the elements. And I would say that this is one of the most memorable experiences in my journalism career, if not the most
So far.
memorable.
It
So
was
far.
very trying, yes.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.